So, based on this research done by Beverly Daniel Tatum, who is a clinical psychologist, professor, and president of Spelman College, based on her research, I found that there is what is called white privilege. And this concept of white privilege is those advantages that Caucasians have over African Americans, however, aren't aware of it. For example, such as education, having availability. Since Caucasians are exposed to better education rather than African Americans, they believe that we are separate but equal, especially since all they're told is, oh, they aren't they haven't even been exposed to what African American education would be like. They're more advanced and given more opportunities than we ever are. And this is another reason why white privilege, since they are oblivious to African Americans and our culture and
the racial composition of the prison population in the United States is very different from the population at large.
This is why the more
negative people are worried about inequality in America today,
blacks,
I think this deserves more attention in the discussion.
Shown to the public.
Racial inequality in the criminal justice system gets ignored because it doesn't affect most people.
Instead of showing
in 2010, over 1.6 million people were in state and federal prisons within the United States. So 497 out of every 100,000 Americans were in jail. About half of 1%. Less than 1%. That doesn't seem very large, but when you separate that population by race, you recognize that the personal effects of the criminal justice system are very unequally shared throughout our society. Whites make up 64% of the total population, but only 31% of the incarcerated population. Blacks represent 14% of society, but 36% of the prison population. Hispanics are 16% of America, but 24% of the American prison population. Less than 1 in 100 Americans are currently in jail, but for some races, genders, and age groups, that ratio is a lot larger. For example, if you're young, black, and male, it's closer to about 1 in 4. That means you'd have a higher probability of going to jail than of getting married or going to college. These results are unequal and problematic as poor black communities lack so many of their members. But what can be done? The causes of this trend are undoubtedly complicated and multi-causal. But there is reason to suggest that part of the blame is our criminal justice system itself. In the ways police officers enforce laws, in the ways that laws are written and prosecuted, and more. In many cases, it is not overt racism by individual actors. Many police officers, prosecutors, and judges are undoubtedly trying to be fair and trying to do the right thing. But economics can explain how unequal enforcement of the criminal law happens anyway. This is because the political and bureaucratic structure of the criminal justice system creates perverse incentives. The formal laws surrounding drug prohibition, for example, are written as if to be colorblind. But people with different levels of wealth face different costs and benefits to participating in the drug trade. Different groups consume different drugs at different rates, and lastly, those groups are politically represented in very different quantities. Thus, they are arrested and incarcerated at very different rates. How could minority groups hope to use the political process to fix inequality when they are systematically over-incarcerated and disenfranchised? Despite noble intentions, politics often does not affect the basic incentives of costs and benefits faced by political or citizen actors. We might need a new approach to social change if we are going to address these problems. We definitely need more study into the causes of inequality, and we should admit that radical changes might be both necessary and preferable to the status quo.
The next subtopic which I related this topic of lack of African American representation in media would be the critical race theory. And specifically when seeing it from a critical race theory point of view, it is, well, the way that the well, those who aren't exposed to African Americans, the way they perceive our race, well, the race of African Americans is based on stereotypes that they have heard because they haven't been exposed themselves, so they don't have a first-person point of view on specifically more than just the negative stereotypes because they don't know any better. Since they haven't been exposed, they don't know for themselves whether or not to believe the stereotypes. So that's why, as a result, on media, most likely you see depictions of the stereotypes in
the images are everywhere. On local news, where often the rule is, if it bleeds, it leads. Black men in handcuffs, in mugshots,
on television
behind bars.
Shows,
on the big screen,
movies.
black men as violent criminals, as pimps, as drug dealers, and in music videos, rappers glorifying the thug life.
Because it's in the hood, thugs in the hood.
Portraying women as sex objects.
Get it together, George.
There are positive images of black men on network television hits like Grey's Anatomy.
Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something.
And recent movies like Will Smith's The Pursuit of Happiness. But in much of mainstream media, the image of black men is decidedly negative, especially in local news, where crime dominates newscasts.
It attracts viewers, it increases ratings, so there is more of it because it's going to attract an audience. And whether it's an editor making a decision...
Paula Poindexter, a journalism professor at the University of Texas, analyzed local news reports from 12 major cities over a 10-year period. Her findings? More than 2/3 of the stories on blacks were about crime, compared to less than 1/3 for whites.
That doesn't mean that African Americans are not committing crimes like everybody else. It's just that at the only time that you report on them in the news and you're showing them as criminals, then there is this visual perception that, you know, blacks are so much more menacing.
Perhaps nobody knows this better than Spike Lee, the award-winning director and producer of more than 35 films.
I get tired of watching the news, local news, and seeing this negative images of young African-American men.
There are people who say, but look at the numbers of African-American men in prison. Look at the black-on-black crime.
But let's show some balance. And there, people out here are doing the right thing, who aren't having babies out of wedlock, who are taking care of their children.
Why is there reluctance to put them on TV?
Why? That's not what they want to see.
Spike developed his sense of what Americans want to see the hard way by making many movies that never became blockbuster hits. Artistic successes like Malcolm X and Do the Right Thing pushed way beyond the stereotypes.
You have success stories, you can have tragic stories. And I think that you have to tell them all.
He's one of the best-known directors around, but Spike still struggles to get financial backing from Hollywood studios for the kind of movies he wants to make.
I'm not saying it's impossible to get a black film made. I'm talking about a specific type of black film. If I want to do a comedy, have black folks shucking and jiving with coonery and buffoonery, I get $100 million for that in a second.
I'm trying to get you what you want.
He finally had a box office hit in 2006 with Inside Man, a bank heist thriller which made nearly twice the U.S. take of Malcolm X.
$300 million worldwide.
You include DVD sales.
That's a ton of money. That's success, clearly, that you're still going hat in hand.
It was an eye-opener. Because I've always been told, well, Spike, you never had a film that made over $100 million, but, you know, what we really care about is box office.
Is it because you're black?
The last concept that I related the lack of African-American representation in media to would be symbolic annihilation. So I got symbolic annihilation from a video that we watched in class, which was about misrepresentation, which was about women in media. However, I believe that concept could also apply to this situation.